The morning sun blazed over Fort Rucker, Alabama, casting long shadows across the airfield where 6 Apache helicopters sat motionless. These weren't just any military aircraft, they were AH-64 Apache attack helicopters, the most advanced fighting machines in the Army's arsenal. But for 3 weeks now, they had been nothing more than $60 million paperweights. Colonel James Harrison stood in the hangar, his jaw tight with frustration. Around him, a team of 12 specialists from Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and the Pentagon's best technical units hunched over laptops and diagnostic equipment. Papers littered the tables. Empty coffee cups stacked like monuments to their failure. "Anything?" Harrison asked, though he already knew the answer. Marcus Chen, the lead engineer from Boeing, shook his head. "The navigation systems keep failing, sir. Every time we think we've isolated the problem, it shifts. It's like chasing a ghost through the machine." The Apaches had started malfunctioning during routine training flights. First, one helicopter's targeting system went haywire. Then another lost navigation. Within days, the entire fleet was grounded. The timing couldn't have been worse. These helicopters were scheduled to deploy to Eastern Europe in 2 weeks for a critical NATO exercise. "We've brought in everyone," Chen continued. "The original design team, software specialists, even retired engineers who worked on the first prototypes. Nobody can figure this out." Harrison's aide, Lieutenant Brooks, cleared his throat. "Sir, there is one person we haven't contacted." "Who?" Harrison snapped. "Sarah Mitchell." The hangar fell silent. Several engineers exchanged glances. Marcus Chen actually laughed. "Mitchell? You mean the woman who claims she designed half these systems? She's a nobody, just a technical sergeant who got lucky with a few patents 20 years ago." "She didn't just claim it," Brooks said quietly. "She did design them. The navigation integration, the targeting interface, the system redundancy protocols, they're all hers." Another engineer, Tom Bradley from Lockheed, scoffed. "I've been in this business 30 years. No enlisted woman designed critical Apache systems. That's just military folklore." Harrison remembered the name vaguely. Sarah Mitchell had been mentioned in some old documentation, but she'd left the military years ago. The official records credited a team of male engineers with the Apache's revolutionary systems. "Where is she now?" Harrison asked. "Running a small electronics repair shop in Huntsville. She fixes phones and computers," Brooks replied. The room erupted in laughter. "You want to bring in a phone repair lady to fix Apache helicopters?" Bradley said, wiping tears from his eyes. "That's rich." Marcus Chen shook his head. "Colonel, with all due respect, we have the best minds in aerospace here. We don't need some has-been soldier who probably exaggerated her involvement in the first place." Harrison looked at the grounded Apaches through the hangar window. His career was on the line. The NATO exercise was crucial for American credibility. He'd tried everything else. "Get her," he ordered Brooks. 2 hours later, a beat-up Ford pickup truck pulled into the base. Sarah Mitchell stepped out, a woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. She carried a small toolbox that looked like it had seen better days. The engineers barely looked up when she entered the hangar. Those who did notice her assumed she was maintenance staff or someone's assistant. Sarah stood quietly, observing the chaos. She recognized some of the diagnostic equipment, though most of it was newer than what she'd worked with. Her eyes moved to the helicopters, and something in her expression changed, a mixture of pride and old pain. "Excuse me, ma'am, this is a restricted area," Tom Bradley said, not looking up from his computer. "I was asked to come," Sarah said simply. Bradley finally looked at her, his expression dismissive. "Are you lost? The commissary is in the other direction." Before Sarah could respond, Colonel Harrison entered with Lieutenant Brooks. "Gentlemen, this is Sarah Mitchell," Harrison announced. The hangar fell silent again. Marcus Chen looked her up and down with obvious skepticism. This is Mitchell. This is who's supposed to save us. Sarah didn't react to the insult. She'd heard worse. She walked past the engineers to the nearest Apache, running her hand along its hull with the familiarity of someone greeting an old friend. How long have they been failing? She asked. 3 weeks, Harrison replied. Started with navigation, then targeting, now nothing initializes properly. Harrison nodded, surprised by her immediate grasp of the progression. Sarah opened her small toolbox and pulled out what looked like an ancient diagnostic cable, something from the early 2000s. The younger engineers snickered. Ma'am, we have equipment worth millions here, Chen said condescendingly. That cable probably came from Radio Shack. Sarah ignored him and walked to a small panel beneath the Apache's cockpit, a panel none of the other engineers had even noticed. She opened it with practiced ease and connected her cable. This won't work with modern systems, Bradley announced loudly, making sure everyone heard him mock her. Sarah pulled out a laptop that looked equally ancient. When she booted it up, the screen showed code that made Chen step forward despite himself. What is that interface? He asked. The original, Sarah said quietly. The one I wrote before they prettied it up and took my name off it. The code on her screen began scrolling rapidly. The engineers gathered around, their mockery fading into confusion. This wasn't any system they recognized, yet it was clearly communicating with the Apache's core processors. That's impossible, Chen muttered. Those protocols were discontinued 15 years ago. Sarah looked at him for the first time, her eyes steady and knowing. Not discontinued. Buried. Under layers of updates and modifications that ignored the foundation. She turned back to her screen. Like building a mansion on quicksand and wondering why the walls crack. 28 years earlier, Technical Sergeant Sarah Mitchell sat in a cramped office at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, surrounded by technical manuals and computer screens. She was 25 years old, the only woman in the Army's Advanced Aviation Systems unit, and she had just solved a problem that had stumped Boeing's best engineers for 6 months. The Apache helicopter program was in crisis. The new AH-64D Longbow Apache needed a revolutionary navigation and targeting system, but every prototype had failed. The computers couldn't handle the complex integration of radar, infrared, navigation, and weapons systems. Pilots complained of information overload. Systems crashed mid-flight. Sarah had grown up in rural Tennessee, the daughter of a mechanic and a schoolteacher. Her father had taught her to fix anything with an engine by the time she was 12. Her mother had insisted she learn to stand up for herself in a world that wouldn't make it easy. Both lessons would prove essential. When Sarah joined the Army at 18, recruiters had pushed her toward administrative roles. That's where women excel, they'd said. But Sarah had fought for a technical position, scoring higher than anyone in her recruitment group on the mechanical aptitude tests. Now, in that cramped office, she stared at lines of code that represented millions of dollars in failed development. Her supervisor, Major Richard Brennan, had given her the task as a joke, letting the girl take a crack at it while the real engineers were at a conference. But Sarah saw something others had missed. The systems weren't failing because they were flawed, they were failing because they were fighting each other. Each component had been designed in isolation, then forced together like puzzle pieces from different boxes. She worked for 72 hours straight, sleeping only in 20-minute intervals at her desk. She rewrote the integration protocols from scratch, creating what she called a binaural bridge, a master system that allowed all components to communicate in a shared language. When Major Brennan returned from his conference, he found Sarah passed out at her desk, her screen showing a simulation of the Apache systems running flawlessly. "What did you do?" he demanded, waking her roughly. Sarah explained her solution, but Brennan's expression grew darker with each word. This wasn't supposed to happen. A female sergeant wasn't supposed to outshine Boeing's million-dollar team. "You'll document everything and hand it over," he ordered. "The contractor team will review and implement it. But sir, I should be part of the implementation. I know these systems. You'll do as you're told, Sergeant. Over the next year, Sarah watched as her designs were implemented in the Apache fleet. The contractors made minor modifications, just enough to claim credit. Her name appeared nowhere in the official documentation. When the new Apache systems were unveiled as a revolutionary breakthrough, a team of 5 male engineers stood on stage receiving commendations. Sarah watched from the back of the auditorium, invisible. She tried to fight it. She filed complaints. She presented evidence. But each time, she was told the same thing: she had been part of a team effort, nothing more. Major Brennan had signed documents stating the work was collaborative, with primary credit going to the contractors. The worst came when she was transferred. Officially, it was a career advancement opportunity. Unofficially, she was being silenced. They moved her to a supply unit, far from anything technical. But Sarah didn't give up. At night, in her barracks, she continued working on improvements to her systems. She developed redundancy protocols that would prevent system failures. She created diagnostic tools that could identify problems before they became critical. She documented everything, keeping copies hidden away. Her fellow soldiers mocked her. They called her Professor and Boeing's secretary. Male colleagues who had once respected her technical skills now dismissed her as delusional, a woman trying to claim credit for men's work. The breaking point came in 2003. The Apache systems she designed were being updated for Iraq deployment. The contractors had problems with the integration, problems Sarah could have solved in hours. She contacted the program office, offering her help. The response was swift and cruel. She received a formal reprimand for interfering with contractor operations and making false claims about classified systems. The message was clear: stay quiet or face court-martial. Sarah left the army a year later, her 20-year retirement secured but her spirit broken. She moved to Huntsville, Alabama, where she opened a small electronics repair shop. It was honest work, far from the cutting-edge technology she loved, but it was hers. She married a kind man named David, a teacher who believed her story even when no one else did. They had 2 children. Sarah taught them both to understand machines and to stand up for truth, even when the world didn't want to hear it. But she never forgot her systems. Late at night, she would pull out her old laptop and review her original code. She kept track of every Apache accident, every system failure reported in the news. She knew the contractors' modifications had introduced vulnerabilities. She knew problems would eventually surface. Now, standing in the Fort Rucker hangar, Sarah looked at the grounded Apaches and felt a mixture of vindication and sorrow. Her systems were failing not because of her design, but because of what others had done to them. "How long will this take?" Colonel Harrison asked. Sarah studied her diagnostic screen. The problem was exactly what she'd feared: cascade failures in the modified integration protocols. The contractors had layered so many updates that they'd lost the elegant simplicity of her original design. "Give me 24 hours alone with one helicopter," she said. Marcus Chen laughed harshly. 24 hours. We've had 3 weeks with entire teams. You've had 3 weeks of looking in the wrong place, Sarah interrupted, her voice steady. You're treating symptoms. I need to cure the disease. Colonel Harrison looked at his multi-million-dollar team of experts, then at the woman in flannel they'd all dismissed. His instincts, honed by 30 years of military service, told him something these engineers didn't understand: competence didn't always come in expected packages. "You've got 12 hours, he said. Bradley, Chen, clear the hangar. Give her whatever she needs." "Sir, you can't be serious," Chen started. "I said clear the hangar." The hangar fell silent after the engineers left. Sarah stood alone with the Apache, the overhead lights casting harsh shadows on the military aircraft that held so much of her past. She ran her weathered hands along the helicopter's hull, feeling the vibration of dormant systems beneath the armor. Outside, Marcus Chen paced angrily, his cell phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, sir, Harrison actually cleared us out. For her. Some woman who claims she designed our systems 20 years ago." He paused, listening. "I know it's ridiculous. She's got some ancient laptop and cables from the Stone Age." Tom Bradley stood nearby, arms crossed. "This is career suicide for Harrison. When she fails, and she will fail, heads will roll." Through the hangar windows, they watched Sarah climb into the Apache's cockpit with surprising agility for someone her age. She moved with the familiarity of someone coming home. Inside the cockpit, Sarah's fingers found switches and panels from memory. She plugged her diagnostic cable into 3 different ports that weren't in any current manual because she had designed them as hidden backdoors for exactly this situation. She'd learned long ago that systems needed secret ways in, paths that couldn't be corrupted by careless updates. Her laptop screen filled with code, not the modern, sleek interfaces the contractors used, but raw command line data that showed the Apache's true nervous system. What she saw made her heart sink. It was worse than she'd imagined. The contractors hadn't just modified her systems, they'd butchered them. They'd added layer upon layer of unnecessary complexity, each addition making money for their companies but weakening the helicopter's core functioning. It was like watching someone pile decorations on a bridge until the bridge collapsed from the weight. Sarah pulled out her phone and called her husband. "David? It's going to be a long night. Tell the kids I love them. Are you okay?" David's voice was concerned. He knew what returning to this world meant to her. "They need me," she said simply. "The systems I built are dying, and I'm the only one who can save them." She worked through the night, stripping away years of modifications like an archaeologist uncovering ancient ruins. Each line of code she removed revealed more of her original architecture. It was elegant, simple, perfect in its efficiency, and buried under corporate greed. At 3 in the morning, Lieutenant Brooks brought her coffee. He was the only one Harrison had allowed inside. "The engineers are taking bets on when you'll give up," he said quietly. Sarah didn't look up from her screen. "What are the odds?" 50 to 1 against you lasting till morning." She actually smiled. "I've had worse odds." Brooks watched her work, mesmerized. "Can I ask you something? Why didn't you fight harder when they stole your credit?" Sarah's fingers paused on the keyboard. "I did fight. I filed reports, gathered evidence, hired a lawyer with money I didn't have. You know what I learned? When the system is rigged against you, sometimes fighting just breaks you more." She resumed typing. "So I waited. I knew someday, someone would need the truth." Outside, Colonel Harrison arrived at dawn, finding his engineering team already assembled. They looked smug, certain they were about to witness Mitchell's failure. "Has she given up yet?" Chen asked. Harrison said nothing, walking past them into the hangar. He found Sarah still in the cockpit, surrounded by handwritten notes and cables running to multiple systems. Her laptop showed something that made him step closer. "Is that the original architecture?" Sarah confirmed. "What your millions of dollars in contracts buried under their improvements?" She initiated a startup sequence. The Apache's systems came alive, not with the usual slow, grinding boot up the engineers had grown accustomed to, but with a smooth, rapid initialization that sounded like the helicopter was taking its first deep breath in years. Every screen in the cockpit illuminated perfectly. The targeting system aligned. Navigation synced. Weapon systems showed green across the board. Harrison called in the engineers. They entered reluctantly, their mockery ready. Then they saw the fully operational Apache, its systems running with a stability they hadn't seen since the helicopters were new. "That's impossible," Chen breathed. "The integration failures were hardware-based." "No," Sarah said, climbing down from the cockpit. "They were greed-based. Every contractor who touched these systems added unnecessary code to justify their contracts. They turned my clean architecture into a digital junkyard. She handed Harrison a USB drive. This contains the fix for all 6 helicopters. But more importantly, it contains the evidence. Evidence. 20 years of documentation. Original code with timestamps. Patent applications that were suppressed. Emails discussing how to remove my name from the project. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes burned with long-suppressed anger. Everything they thought they'd destroyed. Tom Bradley stepped forward aggressively. You can't prove any of that. Those systems were developed by teams of. Sarah pulled out a second laptop, this one modern. She connected it to the Apache and ran a program. The screen displayed code comparisons, her original work beside the current systems, with her digital signatures embedded throughout like fingerprints. Every line of code I write contains a personal signature in the comment structure, she said. It's invisible unless you know where to look. Like an artist signing their painting in a way only they would recognize. The hangar fell silent. Chen's face had gone pale. He pulled out his phone, probably to call Boeing's legal department. But Sarah wasn't finished. She walked to a second Apache and began the same process. You want to know the real tragedy? My original systems were designed to last 50 years with minimal updates. Self-healing, adaptive, elegant. Your contractors turn them into something that needs constant maintenance, constant updates, constant contracts. Harrison's expression darkened. You're saying they deliberately sabotaged the systems? I'm saying they turned a military asset into a revenue stream, Sarah replied. And when the systems finally failed completely, they knew no one would be able to fix them because they'd erased the original architect from history. By noon, Sarah had repaired 3 of the 6 Apaches. Word had spread across the base. Pilots gathered to watch, whispering among themselves. Some of the older pilots remembered when the Apaches had flown differently, better, before all the updates. Chief Warrant Officer Jackson, a 20-year Apache pilot, approached Sarah during a break. Ma'am, I flew the first Longbow Apaches in Afghanistan. They were perfect machines. Then every year, they got worse with updates. We complained, but command said it was necessary evolution. Sarah looked at the grizzled pilot. It wasn't evolution. It was devolution. They took a thoroughbred and turned it into a mule, then charged you for the privilege. Part 4, The Reckoning. By the 14th hour, Sarah had repaired 5 of the 6 Apaches. Her hands shook from exhaustion, but her mind remained sharp, driven by a determination that had waited 2 decades for this moment. The 6th helicopter, however, presented a different challenge. This one's different, she told Colonel Harrison, who hadn't left the hangar. Someone's added encryption I don't recognize. Recent, maybe 6 months old. Marcus Chen, who'd been suspiciously quiet for hours, suddenly spoke up. That's the test bird. We were implementing new security protocols. Sarah turned to him slowly. Security protocols that lock out diagnostic access. Classified improvements, Chen said defensively. Show me, Sarah demanded. I can't. It's proprietary. Colonel, Sarah interrupted, this encryption isn't security. It's a kill switch. Someone programmed this Apache to fail on command. The hangar erupted. Harrison immediately called for military police. Chen tried to leave, but 2 MPs blocked his exit. That's absurd, Chen protested. Why would we? Sarah connected her laptop to the encrypted Apache. Because contracts worth $2 billion are up for renewal next month. If the entire Apache fleet was grounded during critical NATO exercises, Congress would approve any amount to fix them. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, decades of experience guiding her through the encryption. The beautiful part of your plan was that no one could prove it. The systems are so complex now, so muddled with modifications, that induced failures would look like natural degradation. She pulled up code on the main display screen. Except you didn't know about my backdoors. The ones I built into the original architecture. They recorded everything, including this. The screen showed an execution log with timestamps and user IDs. Chen's contractor identification appeared repeatedly, showing midnight access to all 6 Apaches over the past month. Tom Bradley suddenly broke. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Chen said we just create minor problems, things only we could fix. Job security, he called it. Job security? Harrison's voice was ice. You sabotaged military aircraft for job security? We've been doing it for years, Bradley continued, now desperate to minimize his involvement. Small issues, gradual degradations. Chen said it was standard practice. Every contractor does it. Sarah felt sick. All those years, all those Apache crashes in Iraq and Afghanistan that were blamed on pilot error or mechanical wear. How many had been induced failures? Chen pulled out his phone, but an MP immediately confiscated it. I want a lawyer. You'll get one, Harrison said. After we determine how many soldiers died because of your greed. Sarah returned to the 6th Apache, working to remove Chen's sabotage. As she did, she found something that made her stop. Hidden in the deepest part of the code was a message, time-stamped from the day she'd left the army. SM, they silenced you, but your work speaks louder than their lies. A friend. Someone had known. Someone had tried to preserve evidence of her contributions. Lieutenant Brooks appeared at her shoulder. Ma'am, there's someone here to see you. An elderly man in a wheelchair was brought into the hangar. Sarah recognized him immediately, Major General Richard Brennan, retired. The man who'd stolen her work. The hangar fell silent. Brennan looked older than his 70 years, his face gaunt with illness. He raised a trembling hand toward Sarah. I came to apologize, he said, his voice weak but clear. And to confess. Sarah stood frozen. This was the man who'd destroyed her career, who'd signed the papers that erased her from history. Brennan continued, I have terminal cancer. 3 weeks, maybe 4. I couldn't die with this on my conscience. He pulled out a thick folder. Every document I signed, every lie I told, every meeting where we discussed how to bury your contributions, it's all here. Why? Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why did you do it? Boeing offered me a job. Vice president position, $1 million salary. All I had to do was ensure their team got credit. His eyes filled with tears. I destroyed your career for money. I've regretted it every day since. He turned to Harrison. Colonel, Sarah Mitchell didn't just contribute to the Apache systems. She is the Apache systems. Every innovation that made these helicopters legendary came from her mind. We stole it all. The confession hung in the air like a physical weight. Chen and Bradley stood in custody, their conspiracy exposed. The truth Sarah had carried alone for 20 years was finally in the open. But she felt no triumph, only exhaustion. She returned to the 6th Apache and finished removing Chen's sabotage. As the final system came online, all 6 helicopters hummed with synchronized perfection. They're ready, she told Harrison. They'll fly better than they have in 15 years. Harrison looked at the restored Apaches, then at Sarah. What do you need to fix the entire fleet? Name your price. The Pentagon will pay anything. Sarah pulled off her work gloves and looked at her hands, calloused, older, but still capable. I don't want money. I want every contractor who corrupted these systems investigated. I want every soldier who died in a preventable Apache failure to have their record corrected. And I want the truth told. Done, Harrison said immediately. What else? Sarah walked to her old toolbox and began packing up her equipment. I want to go home to my family. I've given the army everything once. I won't make that mistake again. Ma'am, we need you. The Apache program needs you. She turned to face him, and for the first time, Harrison saw the full weight of what she'd endured. "Colonel, 20 years ago, I would have given anything to hear those words. But the army didn't need me then. They needed someone to exploit, someone whose work they could steal without consequence." She handed him a flash drive. "This contains everything: how to maintain my original systems, how to remove contractor corruptions, how to prevent future sabotage. Any competent engineer can follow these instructions. But what if? What if they need me again?" Sarah smiled sadly. "They know where to find me. I'll be in my shop in Huntsville, fixing phones and laptops for people who say thank you and pay their bills. It's honest work, Colonel. More than I ever got here." She started walking toward the hangar door. The MPs stepped aside. The engineers watched in stunned silence. Even Chen and Bradley, facing federal charges, seemed to grasp the magnitude of what they'd been part of destroying. Part 5, Wings of Justice. 3 months after Sarah Mitchell fixed the Apache fleet, she stood in her small repair shop in Huntsville, replacing a teenager's cracked phone screen. The bell above her door chimed, and she looked up to see Lieutenant Brooks in full dress uniform. "Ma'am, I'm here to escort you to Washington." Sarah continued working on the phone. "I already told Harrison no. I'm not coming back." "You're not being offered a job, ma'am. You're being summoned to testify before Congress. And after that." Brooks smiled. "There's something else." Sarah's husband David appeared from the back room. "Go," he said simply. "It's time." The congressional hearing was packed. Sarah sat at a simple table, facing a panel of senators and representatives. Cameras from every major news network focused on her. The story of the woman who'd saved the Apache fleet had leaked, despite the military's attempts to control it. Senator Patricia Hayes, chair of the Armed Services Committee, began the questioning. "Mrs. Mitchell, is it true that you designed the core systems of the AH-64 Apache longbow?" "Yes, Senator." "And is it true that credit for your work was systematically stolen and given to defense contractors?" "Yes, Senator." For 3 hours, Sarah testified. She presented code, documents, patents that had been suppressed. She explained how contractors had deliberately corrupted systems to ensure continued profits. She named names, provided dates, showed evidence. Marcus Chen had already pled guilty to sabotage and fraud. Tom Bradley had turned state's evidence. 17 other contractors had been arrested. But this hearing was about more than criminal prosecution, it was about systemic reform. How many soldiers died because of these corrupted systems? Senator Hayes asked. Sarah's voice broke for the first time. At least 43 confirmed. Possibly twice that many. Crashes blamed on pilot error that were actually system failures. The hearing room fell silent. Families of dead pilots sat in the gallery, some weeping openly. "Mrs. Mitchell," Senator Hayes continued, "what do you recommend?" Sarah straightened. "Complete transparency. Every military system should have its true designer credited. Contractors who modify systems should be held liable for failures. And whistleblowers should be protected, not punished." After the hearing, Brooks escorted Sarah to the Pentagon. She was led to a conference room where General Harrison, he'd been promoted after successfully deploying the repaired Apaches to NATO, waited with the Secretary of Defense and the Army Chief of Staff. But Sarah's attention was caught by another group in the room, 6 Apache pilots in flight suits. Chief Warrant Officer Jackson stepped forward. "Ma'am, we're the pilots who flew your repaired Apaches in the NATO exercise. They performed flawlessly. Better than when they were new." He paused. "We wanted to thank you. And to give you something." One of the pilots handed her a wooden box. Inside was a set of Apache pilot wings, but modified. The helicopter in the center had been replaced with a small computer chip. "We had these made specially," Jackson explained. Every Apache pilot in the Army contributed. Over 800 of us. We call them Mitchell wings, for the person who gave us real wings. Sarah held the wings, unable to speak. The Secretary of Defense stepped forward. Mrs. Mitchell, the President has authorized me to offer you the position of Chief Technical Advisor for Army Aviation. Full civilian rank equivalent to a general, complete autonomy to review and correct all aviation systems. I appreciate the offer, Sarah began. There's more, the Secretary interrupted. Full retroactive credit for all your innovations. Patent rights restored with back pay for 20 years of unauthorized use. And a formal apology from the United States Army, to be entered into the permanent record. Sarah looked at the wings in her hand, then at the faces around her. What about Brennan? He passed away last week, Harrison said quietly. But his confession has been added to the official record. His name has been removed from all patents and credits related to your work. Sarah nodded slowly. And the families of the soldiers who died? Full death benefits and corrected records stating mechanical failure, not pilot error. Several contractors will face wrongful death lawsuits. Sarah walked to the window, looking out at the Pentagon's courtyard. She thought about 20 years of silence, of being mocked and dismissed, of watching her work save lives while others took credit. I'll take the position, she said finally. But with conditions. Name them. I work from Huntsville. I keep my repair shop. I want a team of young engineers, especially women, who I can train properly. And every system I review gets published publicly, no more classified improvements that hide contractor corruption. Done. Sarah turned back to the room. And one more thing. I want a memorial for the 43 soldiers who died. With the truth engraved in stone, that they died not in combat or by accident, but because of greed and lies. The Secretary nodded. It will be built at Fort Rucker, where you fixed the Apaches. 6 months later, Sarah stood before that memorial as it was unveiled. 43 names carved in black granite, with the inscription, "These soldiers died serving their country, betrayed not by enemies but by those who valued profit over lives. May truth always fly higher than greed." The Apache demonstration team flew overhead, 6 helicopters in perfect formation, their systems running on Sarah's restored architecture. They flew a missing man formation, 1 helicopter pulling up and away for the 43 who couldn't fly home. In the crowd, Sarah saw Marcus Chen in a federal prison jumpsuit, brought to witness the memorial as part of his sentence. Their eyes met briefly. He looked away first. Tom Bradley was there too, also in custody. He'd been sentenced to 15 years but had provided evidence that exposed corruption in 12 other defense programs. As the ceremony ended, a young female lieutenant approached Sarah. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Jennifer Park. I'm starting Apache flight school next month. Good luck, Lieutenant. Ma'am, I wanted you to know, they teach about you now. About what you did, what was done to you, and how you never gave up. You're in the official curriculum." Park smiled. "Every Apache pilot will know your name." Sarah watched the young woman walk away, standing straighter, walking toward helicopters that would fly true. David took her hand. "Ready to go home?" Sarah looked one more time at the memorial, at the Apaches circling overhead, at the truth finally carved in stone. "Yes," she said. "My work here is done." But she was wrong. Over the next 5 years, Sarah Mitchell reviewed and corrected systems in every Army aircraft. She exposed 17 more cases of contractor corruption. She trained 32 young engineers who called themselves Mitchell's Mechanics. She saved the military billions and, more importantly, saved lives. The repair shop in Huntsville remained open. Sarah still fixed phones and laptops, charging fair prices and doing honest work. But now, everyone knew who she really was. The woman who designed the Apache's soul. The woman they tried to silence. The woman who'd waited 20 years for justice and then delivered it herself. On her desk, beside screwdrivers and diagnostic tools, sat the Mitchell wings, a reminder that sometimes the person who saves the day isn't the one with the loudest voice or the biggest title. Sometimes it's the one who knows the truth and refuses to let it die. And in Apache helicopters around the world, pilots flew with confidence, knowing their machines were finally honest again. They flew on wings designed by Sarah Mitchell, maintained by her principles, and protected by her refusal to let greed corrupt what she'd built with love. The truth, as Sarah had always known, didn't need vengeance. It just needed someone brave enough to tell it. And finally, after 20 years, it could fly free.